Hello and welcome. It's such an honor having you here, Dr. Ivana Vodopivec, who's the Principal Medical Director of Neuroscience at Roche, Switzerland. Ivana, thank you so much and welcome.
Welcome everyone, and thank you so much, Alan, for having me here. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure having you here, Ivana. And the point of this interview and the main goal is actually to inspire young medical professionals, young aspiring scientists. And to that point, I want to ask probably the most obvious question first, and that is based on your really extensive experience, from Boston, from Harvard, now going to Roche. What would be some of the most important advice for younger colleagues who are aspiring actually to have a successful research career?
Well, I guess there would be not only one advice, but multiple pieces of advice that I'd like to share with them. It is important for obviously for young scientists to be curious, also to be prepared to fail, as and they should know how to use their failures as an opportunity to learn. Nothing will go smoothly in life, not only in professional life, but also in personal life. So that's something that should be turned into an opportunity. Another important aspect should be also paying attention to identifying a niche. That's something that we in drug development call an unmet need, meaning identifying either what the world needs or where the knowledge gap is. And this is exactly where the young scientists should focus on, in addition to obviously loving what they do and obviously being good at it. So identifying this niche or unmet need is in my mind a key to success.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great piece of advice. Instead of maybe focusing on very broad things, try finding your niche and be the best. Try to be the best
Yeah.
at that niche. And speaking of, potentially, let's say I'm a young researcher, I identified my niche. What do you think are the skills needed for myself or somebody, even younger, that need to have this potential, successful career in research?
Well, it's certainly important to be able to listen, to understand what your collaborators are saying, what your colleagues are saying. Science is obviously a teamwork, so being prepared to work in a team. It is important today to know how to communicate clearly, and I would say even succinctly, as it seems as if everyone has a shorter and shorter attention span, as we can appreciate from TikTok and other most recent developments. Negotiating skills are extremely important, I would say as well. And then ultimately, I wouldn't be here where I am without a network. So building a networking, establishing relationships is extremely important. This doesn't obviously only pertain to sort of climbing up the hierarchy, but also returning back and being a good mentor and supporting younger peers or peers who obviously would like to learn and grow and develop their careers.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You mentioned listening. I think listening is probably much more important than actually speaking. And you mentioned networking with senior colleagues
Yeah.
or colleagues of your age. But how do you think maybe young people can achieve that? What advice, like practical advice, do you have? Maybe go to conferences, organize events, or what advice do you have how to achieve actually all of this?
Yes, as you've said, conferences, but certainly just being open to communicate. Do not hesitate, always be ready to reach out. Obviously, not everyone will be ready to respond for many reasons. Maybe they're not right now in a good place to respond, but being open to communicate and to reach out. Any channel obviously
Mm.
is available today, LinkedIn included. So
Yeah.
just put yourself out there and reach out.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I can say from my personal experience, I was surprised by how many people, respond to me. I'm just a,
Yes,
regular kind of
exactly,
young person and people, senior people respond to me. I was surprised.
exactly,
So do it, people, do it.
exactly.
You know, on the other hand, we talked about the necessary skill set and even, progress, as you mentioned, up the ladder. But on the other hand, you have, of course, barriers and challenges, as we all do. So what do you think are the main kind of challenges or even barriers that stand in the way of scientific progress, especially when it comes to younger people and their scientific kind of advancement?
Well, there could be different barriers, right? On the professional and the personal end, I can just speak about potentially my own personal barrier, which was
Mm,
certainly the immigration status in the US, just to name one. Obviously, today, as we all know, scientists are confronted with numerous financial pressures and administrative
mm,
hurdles. The number of grants they need to churn has been really outstanding, and in my mind, this is certainly one of the hurdles to scientific success, as one focuses more on writing grants than actually doing the science. Um, that is for sure. Um, I think there were additional sort of, if we talk about science in general, sort of the scientific field in general, it is
mhm,
interesting to know that there was I believe, a paper published in Nature last year under the title of "Papers and Patents Are Becoming Less Disruptive Over Time."
mm,
And the paper actually explains how it's today. It really is about the information overload,
mm,
and the narrowing in the use of the previous knowledge that limits our ability to progress and to really deliver outstanding and disruptive science, which is an interesting finding. And the paper also highlights how the number of disruptive papers and patents has not climbed up since 1945,
mm.
which is really
Wow.
an interesting finding, right? Given the
Yeah.
all the advancements in science and technology.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I would say almost a concerning finding,
it
or
is
maybe definitely a
absolutely,
concerning finding. And,
absolutely.
and, and just a sub question before the last question here in this short but really great interview. Um, you've been now you're in drug development at a big company such as Roche. I'm in basic research here at Harvard. Can you maybe compare maybe the two or three main differences between actually doing research, if I can put it that way, in at Roche or another pharma company versus basic research?
Yes, absolutely. So the research conducted in pharma is absolutely reliant on teamwork. There is less so the impetus to have the first author on the paper or authorship on the paper. Actually, typically none. We are not
Mm,
incentivized to, at least in late stage development, to publish.
mhm.
So that is one big difference. Obviously, there is no such thing as grant writing. However,
Yeah.
we do need to communicate with regulatory authorities on daily basis. So it doesn't mean that the number of authored documents is actually lower compared to academic research. So I would say these are the two main differences. Another thing to
Mm,
point out is that obviously drug development does not tolerate bias. So we really have to be focused on delivering things that are meaningful, because in the end, large phase 3 studies will demonstrate indeed whether a drug or a molecule works or not.
yeah, definitely. I mean, important and really, great points that you mentioned. And coming to the last question here is about so kind of a summary of everything we talked about: science, scientific progress, all of that. But to actually have access to that science that's cutting edge in Nature, Cell, or really wherever, you have to
Yes,
be able to download the PDF from the Nature website.
absolutely.
But then, yeah, but then we have barriers such as not open access. And speaking of this open access, what's your feeling towards open access? Are you a believer in it? You're a supporter of it, or maybe you think that not all papers should be open access?
I'm a big believer in open access, as obviously it contributes and allows for knowledge to be disseminated. Um, it is less so relevant for me, for example, working at big pharma, because I clearly have access to all papers, but clearly in either environments that do not have access, or even, as you've mentioned, young researchers who may not be affiliated with affluent universities, open access is a key to their success. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I can speak to myself. While I was in high school, and you may say, well, that's kind of too young
Exactly.
for research. I would say it's
Yeah,
probably not too young. I didn't have
exactly.
access to Nature or Cell, and while I
Exactly.
was even in med school, I didn't have access to many journals. So I think it's great to have really open access. Dr. Ivana Vodopivec from Roche, thank you so much. It's been a huge
Thank
pleasure
you,
having
Alan.
you here.
Thank you. Same here. Thank you very much for the interview and all your questions.